Hello to every skivers here and welcome to the Skyrim Whisper. It's been a while and I hope not each of you are doing well since the last video and that you're ready to put your mind into the depth of Skyrim's lore. Today we are going to talk about vampirism and its relationship with the orc culture. But before we delve further into this, I wanted to give a huge thanks to two of my subscribers. First, Tionen, as he suggested this intriguing combination to me and thus gave me inspiration. In addition, he offered me the Skyrim's Anniversary Edition, which I will use in future videos. And secondly, towards Heistenberg, as he generously offered me Morrowind and therefore allowed me to access much more lore content. So really a big thanks for you too, you're amazing and I definitely remember that. Again, if anyone has topic suggestion for future videos, don't hesitate to share these ideas and leave a comment. This being said, let the journey begins. Vampirism and orcs. It might be one of the strangest and terrifying mix we can ever find lurking on Tamriel. But before speaking about the combination itself, let me remind you what vampirism is. Vampirism is a disease or a curse caused by the Daedric Prince of Domination, Slavery and Rape, Molag Bal. One can be affected in two different ways. The most common one being the transmission of the disease by another vampire through a bite or a scratch. The other, much rarer, is to contract vampirism directly from Molag Bal himself, like the daughter of Cold Harbor, or indirectly by replacing one's blood by a vampire's one, which is what Hakon did to the player character. The effects of vampirism hugely differ from a vampire to another, depending on the way the individual contracted it and the nature of the link with Molag Bal. It can also depend on the environment. As the Volkja vampire clan, the one we find in Skyrim, have the power of ice manipulation, which reflects the really cold lands he lives in, for example. The differences between vampires are certainly more important than the ones between werewolves. Some can use necromancy, shape ice, others can disjoint their jaw to swallow full corpses and not only feed on blood. There are some that can turn into mists, wolves, bats, while some can walk under the sun or on the water and charm their victims. There is, of course, the transformation into a vampire lord, as we see in the Volkja clan, that is not possible for other ones. And some clues seems to show that some vampires affected with the disease, not directly from Molag Bal or a high-ranked vampire, are not always immortal. So we can see there is a diversity of powers and thus implications of being a vampire. With this in mind, let's talk about the different ways an orc might be influenced by his vampirism and the potential contradiction, or on the contrary, surprising concordances between the two. Like the first video about Khajiits and werewolves, we are going to start with orcs' religion and how it views vampirism. As always, we'll begin with the origin myth. As you may know, the most popular creation myth among orcs is the transformation of Trinimac into Malacath. Orcs were once Aldmers. The only difference was that they were strict followers of Trinimac, one of the warrior god of Altmeri pantheon. Trinimac was an Aedroth, the singular word for Aedra, and the one who ripped the heart of Locan out of his chest, allowing Auriel to bury the heart deep under the Red Mountain. He was powerful, embodiment of honor, justice and dignity. He was worshipped as the leader of elves against men during war times. However, some of the Altmer were against their system, as the Altmeri society valued hierarchy, wealth, and was somewhat corrupted by powerful politicians. These dissident Altmers were convinced by one of their kin, Veloth, to reject this old way of thinking and their pantheon, preferring the teaching of the Daedra, Azura, Boethia, and Mephala. As tensions arose into the Altmer society, Boethia wanted to rally the worshipper of Trinimac under his influence. He decided to battle Trinimac and to eat him, thus proving the superiority of Daedra over Aedra. He then defecated Trinimac, and by so he was transformed into a shameful and revengeful god, Malacath. Some of his worshippers were convinced by Boethia and joined the dissident Altmers, forming the Chimers, ancestors of today's Dunmers, or Dark Elves. Some others were frightened and decided not to follow Boethia and continued to worship the rest of the pantheon. They rejoined the Altmers, ancestors of today's Altmers, the High Elves. But the most loyal of Trinimac worshippers accepted his new form and therefore were changed as a reflection to their new god. They became distorted, rejected by the Altmer and Chimeras alike, thus being outcasted with a new rage coursing through their veins. They became the Orcimer, the Orcs, and began to scatter through the lands and to form strongholds. This creation myth has different versions, one of them stating that Trinimac wasn't eaten, but rather stabbed in the back by Boethia, and under the influence of his own shame about being unable to protect his followers and being beaten without any honor, the blood of his wounds formed the Orcs. It is unclear if Trinimac did or didn't die in this version, however. But there are also a lot of hints that goes against this creation myth. I'm not going to explore them all here, but it's mostly about time, because this myth supposes that the creation of the Orcs happened after the discovery of Tamriel by the elves, whereas it was stated that Altmers discovered Orcs when they arrived in Tamriel for the first time, which means that Orcs existed before the separation of Chimers and Altmers and were natives of Tamriel. Some of Tamriel's scholars think that there is a common ancestor between goblins and Orcs, for example. However, the vast majority of the Orcs believe in Malacath as their father god, which is what interests us for this video, and this is why I'm going to mostly focus on vampirism viewed from the Malacath belief system. To understand the relationship between vampirism and the main belief system, it's important to know what Malacath is the god of, and what is his teaching. Malacath is the god of outcasted, ostracized, keeper of sworn oath, and of bloody curses. Even though he is considered a Daedric prince, he has Aedric ascendant, as he was identified as Trinimac before. He is undoubtedly a warrior god, as he teaches to defend one's honor by fighting and glorify conflict as a practical and realistic way to solve problems rather than let them develop due to cowardice, pacifism, or hesitation. However, he does not encourage rampaging against the community or family, as internal conflicts in strongholds are paid with gold and blood, but should not damage the cohesion of the group. Murder, thievery, and liar are therefore prohibited inside the community. In other words, Orcs doesn't kill or trick each other easily. Orcs have a very unique relationship with their god, They mostly see Malacath as their father, a rageful but fair one. And the most surprising thing is that the relationship has reciprocity. Malacath himself do consider orcs as his beloved children. He is depicted as really possessive and therefore jealous about his followers. An orc, becoming a vampire, is tied to the Daedric prince Molag Bal, thus breaking his ties with Malacath. It can be seen as ultimate treason, and therefore provoke the rage of the god. As the deity of sworn oath, Malacath don't hesitate to doom and curse those who betray him. This is exactly what happens in the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim during the quest The Cursed Tribe. The stronghold of Largashbor is weakened due to unnatural forces, giants and bears attacking regularly, and the chief being sick. We learn that all of this is caused by the behavior of the chief, Yamaz, who led the shrine of Malacath being overtaken by giants and didn't want it to take responsibility, thus impacting the whole tribe. In other words, Malacath did curse Yamaz for his disrespect and dishonorable behavior. Therefore, we can easily think that an orc accepting the gift of another god, Molag Bal in that case, especially in order to become more powerful and achieve things he could not by his own, will provoke the wrath of Malacath upon him, and logically of other orcs. Contracting vampirism in order to gain powers, spells, immortality, which is something we are going to talk more about, can be seen as both a betrayal and a sign of cowardice. Because the orc didn't take the time and the effort to overcome his limits thanks to his own strength and determination and preferred an external force to do so. However, something that is often pointed out about vampire orcs is the apparent contradiction between the fighting style of vampire and the orcish one. Some orcs that using magic, being sneaky or even charm people, are a sign of weakness that will always be labeled as cowardice. But I wanted to remember you that orcs do use magic. They have a deep shamanic culture, especially for wise women who use elemental restoration and alteration magic. And that they can be really cunning, and that sneak or discretion are not always disdained by orcs, as it is stated in the book Orc Clans and Symbology. The Wolf Clan. This clan was known for conducting effective and terrorizing raids during the night. They were adept at moving through darkness and often took their enemies completely by surprise. Playing a sneaky and magic-using orc is therefore not antagonistic with their culture. It may not be that common, but remember that we encounter a knowledge-seeking mage orc in the College of Winterhold, a rag grow shrub. In addition, all vampires are not sneaky and magic-based, as, for example, the Quara clan, a Dunmer vampire clan from Morrowind, is known for his extraordinary raw strength. They are described as follows. They fear nothing, and with good reason. Of all the clans, they are the strongest, at least physically. They are not subtle, and will rather slaughter an entire village than choose a few on which to feed. Orcs are driven to obtain and acknowledge power, and becoming a vampire is undoubtedly a good mean for that. But as it was stated before, it goes against Malacath's teachings, as it is an external strength given by betrayal. However, as Malacath is a really protective god, he may tolerate vampirism in certain conditions. He indeed, as the god of ostracized, tends to show comprehension or even mercy upon individuals who have been wronged or tricked by others. He is overly protective about his children who suffer from Daedric deeds. According to the 16 Accords of Madness, Sheogorath did trick an orc, Gro-Goldfolly, the son of Malacath, with an enchanted sword, the Neb Crescent. The sword caused Emek to lose his mind and go insane. He killed a young orc in his frenzy. Sheogorath then summoned Malacath to show him the murder and asked him to avenge the death of the girl, in exchange for the right to claim Emeg's soul into the Shivering Island, Sheogorath's Oblivion Realm. Malacath, burning with rage at the sight of this brutal murder, beheaded Emek, before realizing that it was his own son, and that he was tricked to kill by Sheogorath. Malacath mourned the death of his son and the loss of his soul into the realm of another Daedric prince, blaming himself for not being able to protect his loyal follower and beloved child. This shows that Malacath doesn't want his children to suffer and to be tricked, and his will to take responsibility to bring justice and avenge his people. We can imagine that an orc who became a vampire without his consent will certainly be actively protected by Malacath, as he understands well the pain of being tricked and betrayed by a Daedric prince. Remember that Trinimac was twisted and changed against his will due to Boethia, thus making a lot of his followers turning their back on him, but became the god of the one who accepted him nonetheless despite his new monstrous nature. An innocent orc becoming a vampire due to a Daedric trap, therefore becoming so monstrous that he can no longer be among his own kin, is a huge reflection of Malacath's own story. I'm convinced it can even lead Malacath to try to find a cure or the way of claiming his soul into his own Daedric realm to assure the vampire will not suffer for eternity into Cold Harbor, or actively fight Molag Bal to avenge and protect his child. Turning his back to a tricked orc would be seen as betrayal from him and as failure of his role as a father god. However, it can also lead him to kill the vampire orc if this one suffers too much of his condition and wants to die. If the orc is becoming a threat to the others, for example, in a stronghold, then the orc might also be killed, as he goes against the community and challenges their survival. I don't really see Malacath being passive about a vampire rampaging in a stronghold, menacing the entire community of becoming vampires. In other words, the behavior of Malacath would hugely depend on the motives behind the orc's vampirism. There is also the topic of the afterlife and the relationship about death. Orcs don't fear death. It is so true that having a long life might be problematic for them. They often see the old age as the weak one, as they can't be useful for the community anymore, be it by fighting, gathering resources, or taking decisions. Old males and females won't reproduce, as it might lead to weaker generations. Old males can't become or stay chiefs. For them, pursuing their life is an insult against the stronghold and Malacath himself, because it is seen as holding on something without any value anymore. So, similarly to Nords, they crave for an honorable death in battle. There is no point about extending one's life, and by so immortality isn't something that most orcs would be appealed to. The constant threat of death is what boils their blood and gives them the bravery and strength. They want thrill and danger. Being immortal will cut off this very sense of danger that are so precious for them. In addition, their afterlife is appealing. They'll go to the Malacath realm, the Ash Pit. The Ash Pit is made of smoke and ashes, which represents all that an orc should be fighting for, the endless war and conflict of existence. In the center of the Ash Pit stands the Ashen Forge, Malacath's own forge, with a fire hotter than the sun, and fueled by the adhesion each orc has to the Malacath god. Here, the orc souls are thrown into the coal, warmed and refined, their existential grudge melted and poured into the existence of other orcs that are born on Tamriel. Some exceptional grudges are even melted into legendary weapons by Malacath himself. In this realm, orcs can drink, fight and compete freely, like Nords in Sovngarde. We easily understand that this afterlife is more appealing to an orc than the one of Cold Harbor, Molag Bal torturing, raping and damaging souls that are claimed into his realm. Becoming a vampire to become immortal is useless for an orc. Having the risk to be doomed to such an awful afterlife will not be the preferred option of most individuals. If an orc become a vampire, he then, as a paradox, should fear much more death than his mortal counterpart. He would have more strength than normal orcs, but would want to hold on his existence, as death will be ultimately seen as a failure for him, taking away all his gifts and powers and results into being dominated by Molag Bal. He also will not be purged of his mortal grudges thanks to the Ashen Forge, which means he will not transmit it to other generations. He then will not have any legacy for Orcs community. Similarly, contracting vampirism may be considered as to not fulfill the code of Malacath, and by so to not fuel the Ashen Forge call. Being a vampire will cause the orc to be completely separated, even spiritually, to his kin, as he doesn't contribute to the soul legacy. Utmost individualism, utmost betrayal in Malacath's regard. But there is another belief that is sufficiently shared among orcs to have influence toward the question of vampirism, which is why I'm going to cover it here too. Indeed, there are some orcs who think that Malacath is a false god, an usurpator, the result of Boethiah's lies. These orcs believe that Trinimac is still the same as he was before being eaten by Boethiah. They think that he wasn't really eaten, but that Boethiah created an illusion, a false god, aimed to lure orcs away from their original deity. Trinimac awaits that his beloved followers remember him and turns away from Malacath. For them, the bestial tendencies of the orcs are a result of the belief in Malacath, which means they indirectly worship Boethiah. Orcs who believe in Trinimac consider that they can elevate themselves to reach the same degree of civilization as their cousins, the High Elves. Strongholds are, by so, viewed as a degraded way of living. The card of Malacath must be replaced by Trinimac's teaching and proper laws. It even briefly became the official Orc religion during the Second Era, under Kurog-gro-Magrath and Gotrog-gro-Nagram's reign as kings of the Second and Third Orsinium. For such orcs, vampirism would be severely punished and avoided, and cannot be justified by religious reasons. Trinimac seems much more uncompromising about Daedric curses and disease than Malacath. He is an Aedra, after all, and actively fights to avoid corruption among his followers. Them being tricked by Boethiah is one thing, as he is the prince of betrayal and manipulation itself. Remembering Trinimac as he was might be enough to earn forgiveness, but to contract vampirism might be too much. However, if it was an unwanted condition, Trinimac, as a warrior god of justice, might kill the individual to shorten his suffering or to avoid the spread of the disease. Trinimac, as the Knight of Oriel, the sun god of Altmerth, is therefore tied to the sun-purging powers, and its devastating effects on vampires. Much like Stendarr, he may have the power of cleaning evil, leading him being a strong opponent toward vampires. Their afterlife also differs from followers of Malacath, as when a Trinimac worshipper dies, he joined the Aetherius to be reunited with his ancestors. It is nonetheless shown that they still have a huge emphasis on battle and celebration while being in Aetherius, but with a more family-oriented theme. Again, a vampire orc might be lured away from the glory of this afterlife, sliding from Aetherius to an Oblivion realm. However, if we take the Nord point of view about Malacath, especially the Altmoran pantheon, Malacath was represented as Orkey, the snake god of death and trickery. It was an adversary god who acted against men and were leader of orcs. According to an old legend, which I describe in more detail in my video about Alduin and his resurrection shout, Orkey cursed men, thanks to Alduin's help, to have a really short lifespan, 6 years old more precisely, and Wulfarth, a Nord hero, invoked Shor to save his people. Shor won, and a part of Orkey's curse was redirected on the orcs' lifespan, reducing their elvish lifespan to a one similar to man. An orc, if he happened to hear this version, which again is from the Nord point of view, can maybe become bitter against Malacath, and similarly to the Trinimac worshipper, wants to return to a more Aldmeri way of living. And Aldmers have really long lifespan, hundreds of years. We can imagine an orc being bitter against Malacath's influence over his short lifespan, wanting to find a way to live much longer, even if it means contracting a daedric condition. It will certainly not please Trinimac, but an orc with, let's say, a spiritual crisis would want to find an alternative way far from both Malacath and Trinimac, claiming by his own path the life years that rightfully belongs to him. Now that we have covered the religious implications of being a vampire orc, both in regards to Malacath and Trinimac belief systems, it is time to see if there is any example of already known orcs suffering from vampirism. It is time for history. Contrary to what we may think, there are several cases of known vampire orcs in the Elder Scrolls. Besides unnamed NPCs we can find in the Elder Scrolls for Oblivion, for example, there are some that are part of the lore. In the same game, there is Angranak Gro-Malog, also called the Grey Prince, son of Lord Leviticus. He was the grand champion of the arena and believed he was from noble lineage. He didn't know who his father was, despite having his name, and charged the player to untie this mystery. He knew he was only half orc, but not the nature of his other half. It turned out that his father, Lord Leviticus, was a vampire, making him an half-vampire. His reaction to this knowledge is really interesting, as it shows us how the orc culture can see such condition. He indeed was in shock and was filled with repulsion, as he considered vampires as spawn of evil and felt filthy and dishonored. If the conditions are met, he will even ask the player to kill him in combat to clean his name. We can understand, thanks to this statement, that the reputation is really important for orcs. They challenge themselves, they compete and are bound in companionship, being battle brothers and sisters. The value of one individual depends on his deed, but also on one's lineage. This is logic, considering that each generation should be stronger than those before, thanks to the genital genes. In consequences, an orc finds pride is his ancestor prowesses, and he is bound to honor, surpass, and transmit it to his own children. Angranak was both shameful of his nature and his father. He then wanted to end his life like a true orc, not a half one, maybe in order to fulfill his duty towards Malacath and access the Ash Pits, being killed in battle. We can also see that righteousness is paramount here. Orcs doesn't stand for evil despite their violent nature. They are violent because they fight for what needs to be protected and done. They believe in retribution, blood for blood, but not absolute domination, especially based on unnatural forces such as vampires do. Killing himself was the only solution for Angranak. He didn't ask for Malacath's forgiveness, nor he tried to hide this fact. He was honest and wanted to die so. However, we can see that despite being born a vampire, it doesn't appear that he was cursed or rejected by Malacath. Never in his life was he hunted down under the god's order, reinforcing the theory that Malacath may feel comprehension and still be here for his children when they are unwillingly outcasted. Angranak might have been an ultimate outcast due to his birth, yet he was the only one taking the decision of his own death. He wasn't punished, he was free until the end. Another vampire orc can be spotted, this time in the Elder Scrolls Online, and he is much more different than the previous one. His name is Otholug gro-Goldfolly, and he is the patriarch of the Bloodmist clan, formed with vampires orcs. Little is known about him and the formation of this clan. However, his dialogue lines shows his personality. Let me show you. A fool and his blood are soon parted. Your blood shall be yours. Fresh blood for my thralls, drink my children. We can clearly see that he doesn't seem to care about shame or being victim of his vampirism. He rather enjoys it and the ultimate powers it gives to him. He wants to feast upon mortals and is frenzied by battle. The Godfolly stronghold is also overrun with vampires, making it the only vampire stronghold in Tamriel. It's really fascinating to see some of his clan's members, as they combine the traditional orc abilities and hierarchy with vampiric powers. For example, they are the Bloodmist berserkers, who use a naturally present orc perk, the Berserker perk. There are also Bloodmist witches who resemble the wise women traditionally found in each stronghold. It appears that despite their vampirism, they maintained the traditional hierarchy of the stronghold, be it because of habits or its practicality. Orcs seems to have a very deep connection with community, and maybe they wanted to all survive as a tribe, being doomed altogether. The last mention of a vampire orc can be found in Skyrim. Even though not a lot of people remember him, I'm talking about Malkus. Malkus is a vampire from the Volkir clan, although we don't encounter him in their castle. He is the vampire who tried to enthrall the moth priest Dexion Evicus in the Four Bears hideout. He can be found dead if you sided with the vampire, killed by a Dawn God agent, or alive and being an opponent if you're with the Dawn Guard. His fighting style is not out of the ordinary, commonly shared by other vampires or even bandits. He wears a light armor vampire set, uses destruction magic, mostly fire, and a one-handed weapon. It doesn't appear to say anything about him being an orc. However, his interaction with Dexion can be quite interesting, as follows. The more you fight me, the more you will suffer, mortal. I will resist you, monster, I must. How much longer can you keep this up, Moth Priest? Your mind was strong, but you're exhausted from the struggle. Must resist. Yes, I can feel your defenses crumbling. You want it to end. You want to give in to me. Now, acknowledge me as your master. Yes, master. This is the narrated effect of the Charm Person spell. We can see two things here. Malkus, as a vampire, has the ability to lure and manipulate the mind of Dexion. However, it's fascinating to see that he's not subtle at all here. When thinking about charming spell, we easily imagine a well-structured or seductive speech, insinuating things that lead the victim to side with you and to believe you. But here, Malkus doesn't hide his motives. He straightforwardly says he is attacking Dexion's mind and will make him submit to his will. This is a battle of will and determination. Malkus literally forces the mind of his victim, exhausting him. He handled this charm spell like a warrior. He besieged him both physically and mentally. He uses the words strong, defenses, exhausted, struggle, and crumble. It sounds like a real battle. One can argue that it must be the way vampires do it, as the victim is unwilling to be lured, and I can agree with that. However, it is much more satisfying to see this as his orc nature. He used to be a great warrior, maybe had he even besieged real fortresses before, and maybe, Rakh, knowing the nature of his only orc servant, asked him to do this job, to integrate and enthrall Dexion. What best to take a strongly protected mind than someone who knows how to handle a siege? What is better than an orc? Now, we are going to talk about the impact vampirism can have on the everyday life of an orc. There are several places an orc can live in, and each of them will be affected differently by his condition. Vampirism will surely result in the impossibility to live in a stronghold, as the community safety is threatened. If a vampire orc can't control himself, it will lead the stronghold members to try to kill him or at least to exclude him. In addition, even if the orc is not considered as a threat, he can still be considered as a burden, which is not much better. Indeed, most vampires can't go outside during the day, and therefore can't contribute to the collective tasks. However, this particular perk can lead to the exact opposite behavior, a vampire orc being the only one able to efficiently watch the stronghold at night. The variety of powers he might have could even be seen as an opportunity for the members to be even stronger against your natural phenomena, for example. In other words, a vampire orc might be properly used by the rest of the community. Being a vampire, in most cases, stops your aging process, thus preserving your strength and your mental faculties, reading off the one of the main motivation behind shortening an old orc life, accumulating experiences and thus wisdom, strategies and knowledge would lead the entire stronghold to be better prepared to face tough times. We can imagine one vampire orc inside a stronghold taking the role of the wise one, transmitting his knowledge to each generation to continue to serve his community and still respect the code of Malacath despite his own condition. He may be the ultimate outcast of his own family, but uses this position to help. Yet he will likely not become or still be the chief, as a chief is meant to be battled and killed, to be replaced by the winner, preserving strong genes for future generations. It's not even sure that a vampire can still properly conceive children, therefore an immortal already dead vampire chief will be a bad thing for a stronghold. Well, we know that the Grey Prince was half vampire, leaving the possibility for vampires to conceive, but we don't really know if it's that common or even normal. Take a look at Haakon. Despite losing his daughter for centuries, he didn't conceive another child. His entire family was transformed into vampires. He didn't create one from scratch after being a vampire himself. And we don't encounter vampire-born characters. All the vampire child we find in the game were transformed. But one interesting thing we can learn from the Grey Prince's existence is that vampirism can help orcs to reproduce with other races. Much like Khajiit, orcs can't reproduce with other races. However, the Grey Prince, being half orc and half vampire, it seems to break this limitation. A vampire orc falling in love with another race person can potentially have children. For orcs who live in the 4th Orsinium, who was rebuilt in the beginning of the 4th era in the Dragon-Tailed Mountains, situated between Skyrim and Malkus, things are different. There, the beliefs in Malacath and Trinimac are still discussed. There are underground tensions between the two systems, and therefore it impacts the inhabitant daily life. It might be much more difficult for a vampire orc to live there than in any other places. Firstly, the constant demolition and reconstruction cycles are unfitting for a long-term life, and to safely hide. If a vampire wants, for example, to blend into advantageous positions close to the power, much like the Cerulean vampires do, he has to know that the power will not always be in the same hands. It's easy to lose the status when the whole city is demolished by 1 or 2 armies. Secondly, as a vestige of the 2nd and 3rd Orsinium's religious position, you could be hunted down by a very unique organization, the Vosh Rakh, or Blade of Courage. This is a super violent group created by fervent worshippers of Trinimac. Much like the Vigilant of Zendar, they act like paladins against all of the deity's enemies. They often used terrorist actions against Malacath's temples and killed his worshippers. As you can guess, Trinimac is not a big fan of vampires and Daedric influences. Try to be a vampire orc in Orsinium, and you will be hunted down by an entire faction of orcish inquisitors following an angry and war-loving Daedric god. And remember, Trinimac is the Knight of Oriel, using solar powers. After all of this, maybe your best chance is to be outside both strongholds and Orsinium, living in a city or a village, to be in the wilds with bandits, for example, or to join an already existing vampire clan. Ironically, racial stereotypes can help you hide your true nature. Orcs are known to be hella strong, ferocious, and other races don't hesitate to consider them as savage and bloodthirsty. Drinking the blood of your enemy? Well, for strangers, it would sound like a typical orcish behavior. Being abnormally strong, orc berserkers are renowned for their exceptional strength and resistance. Thanks? Your dentition is already messed up with huge tusks. It's not rare to see orcs in the wild with bandits or avoiding people too. But as an orc, you had a chance to serve in the Legion, as orc soldiers were really prized for both their skills and their discipline. A lot of ex-soldiers didn't return in their native stronghold after the Great War, and preferred to keep their link with the Empire. And a special vampire clan has crucial influence amongst the Empire, especially in Cyrodiil. The Vampyrum of Cyrodiil, a unique clan of manipulative vampires who blend in the highest ranks of the imperial political sphere. It's not impossible for an orc fighting for the Empire to have encountered this clan. In any ways, keep in mind that a vampire orc can be chased by standard vigilance, the Dawn Guard, and the Vosh Rakh, and that one of your best assets to hide your nature is, funny enough, to play with orc stereotypical traits, as other races wouldn't find your appearance and behavior that off-putting. Well, my little skiers, I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. Don't hesitate to share your thoughts about it and to bring up your own theories on this topic. I wish you all a great day and see you in the next video.